And we're live.
And we're live.
It's
It's exciting. All right, well, let's jump right in. Everyone, big thank you to Mikey for all his hard work here. And Mikey, totally cool if you can stick around, but really do appreciate you getting this set up. It's really a lot of fun for us to come together as a group like this. Currently on the line, we have Miranda May and Brandon Glecken.
Not to interrupt you, we don't have any viewers yet. Let's wait a couple. Let's wait another.
Oh, we don't have any viewers? So, like, should we, like, wait because it's recording or, like, not?
So it's recording right now. But that's fine. But like, it doesn't matter. I'm just waiting until a few more people, like.
Is it? Oh, the chat is that on the side?
I'm just wondering because, like, if this is the recording, well, maybe we can edit the recording or something. The opening will just be like us, like, small talk. We're also waiting for Steven Greitzer, who's going to join us.
Oh, I think people are watching. I just got a text that Adam's watching. All right, cool.
Nice.
We can start now. Perfect. All you guys do your thing.
We can start now. Cool.
Yeah, you can start now.
Is there a way to see who's attending? Or who's viewing? Mikey.
Yeah, you guys can start. All good.
Cool.
I'm gonna run out now.
Okay. Is there a way to see who's viewing? I'm just curious.
I don't think so.
No? Okay. So we just lost Mikey. We'll get started here. We also have Steven joining us, and unfortunately Elliot was unable to make it tonight as well. But we definitely can expand and do another in the future. Let's jump right in. So first off, we're going to go around and speak a little bit, just high-level context on kind of a little bit of the background. Guys, I sent over some thoughts on that. But just as a refresher, go around, company, what you guys focus on, stage and sector, when you were working there, when you joined, where you were in school, where were you working at Excel, and a brief overview about recruiting, kind of how you got into the process, and then I'll have some general questions. Oh, but before we start, and maybe I'll say this again because I don't know if people are joining later. Otherwise, if you want to submit a question, I think there's a place to do that while viewing the Q&A thing, and we'll be able to see your questions. So throw a question in there at any time. Happy to get that into the mix, and we'll do it. But first, let's start with Brandon. How about you start with a little bit of context, and then we'll keep going around and get started.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So I'm at Battery Ventures, which my guess is that you all will be familiar with that because that's been a Birthright Excel ventureship company for a while. And so I focus primarily on early stage enterprise SaaS, I would say, but I kind of am able to be kind of involved in a number of different things. So kind of still figuring out exactly where my core focus will be, but it'll probably be something within that. To give context, right now I'm primarily working on an ed tech project, but we'll see kind of how that goes and where that ends up ending up. So in terms of the way that I got here, so I guess my first experience with VC was through Birthright Excel, actually. So I interned at Bessemer, which is another great firm, during my 10 weeks in Israel. And while I was there, my mentor introduced me to a guy, Paz, who worked at Battery. We became really close friends. We got lunch probably every couple weeks, and I went to his birthday party, and we just really hit it off. And actually, the one investment Bessemer made over the summer was in a company called Stratascale. We co-invested in that deal with Battery. So that was helpful during recruiting when they asked me, could you do due diligence on our potential deals? And I could say, yes, I have done due diligence on a deal that you actually did. I think that line kind of killed it. But so generally speaking, so I did that internship at Bessemer. Then I went to work at a bank at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. Didn't love that. Was really excited to get back into the VC thing, and then kind of did on-campus recruiting, and that's how I kind of got into it. But I'll go more in depth on it later, I guess.
Awesome, thanks, Brandon. Miranda, same for you.
So I am actually, I'm doing a super senior year at Penn. I worked at Insight Venture Partners this past summer as an internship. It's VC private equity firm based primarily looking at kind of growth stage, later stage companies, minimum investment size, normally around 10 million, so that's kind of where they sat. In terms of how I got there, I studied engineering and business, so I was kind of looking for something in the middle where I could use business and technology on a day-to-day basis, and I was still trying to figure out where I kind of fell between the two lines. I had a great experience. I really loved the people I worked with, and I learned a ton. I'm actually not returning, because I'm not going to go into VC for my first kind of career path. Not quite sure yet where I'm ending up, but happy to talk about how I got there and the process and my experience. And I really learned a lot and had a great time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So as I mentioned, we'll also have Steven Greitzer joining us shortly, so when he comes, we'll have him do some context. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Avery Rosen. I was part of the first class of Excel in 2011 RM group over there. So folks like Lisa and Elliot, I know, who did it in the years following me. Went to Penn for college, and I had Insight, where Miranda worked, was recruited very heavily at Penn's campus. They take a lot of Penn folks and a lot of the Penn team, and I got very far along with them multiple times, and ultimately in the last time they said, look, we're not going to have the space for you this year, but talk to this guy. So, they're up and coming firm, and think it might be good for you. So I actually got a referral off of a pass, which was awesome. And it allowed me to be the first junior hire at the firm where I'm still at, since I graduated in 2013, which is called Lead Edge Capital. We are a growth fund in New York City doing similar deals to Insight, but just smaller checks generally. So growth stage deals, really just filtering for product market fit as the main criteria. So that could be a company that's doing $3 million in revenue run rate or $16 million revenue run rate. Is probably a little more down the fairway, but that's the type of range, and we'll write checks anywhere from $2 million to $60 million bucks. Our model is that all of our capital is from a group of individual investors. So we actually have 300 people who've invested in my fund, and we leverage them to help companies. So for me, on the front lines, and we'll talk a bit more about what the role is like and kind of what you're doing. It's helpful to tell a story that's a little bit different, especially in a space with such great firms such as the ones where Brandon and Miranda are part of. So that's a little bit of the context there. Let me see if I cover those buckets I wanted to mention. Yeah, that was it. So I joined, like I said, 2013, and I've been there about 2.5 years. So from there, that's cool. Let's jump. I'll throw out with some general questions and a reminder. If you do have questions you want to submit at any time, please do. We're happy to add your questions in there, but figure we'll keep the conversation about kind of what is the role in VC, best practices on jumping into the industry and recruiting for it and all of that. And then also, if we have some time, maybe talk about some deals. So let's get started. I'll pose the first general question. But I think, yeah, it's just about kind of, let's hear about kind of the day-to-day and what you sort of like most about the role in your experience or are liking most. And I think that'd be a good place to start. So how about we start with you, Miranda, kind of about what the role's like, kind of what you like most about it.
So Insight does a great job of having its analysts kind of really go out there and look for startups and really being on the front line of figuring out what the company wants to look for. So Insight focuses exclusively on internet and software companies. So on a day-to-day kind of basis, we were going out and trying to figure out what looked like an interesting startup, what would make sense for Insight, or what would make sense for Insight portfolio companies. So we would look at M&A opportunities and also standalone investments. So that meant reading a lot of blogs.
Hold on one second, Miranda. Let's since Steve-O's here, we're all excited to see him. Steve-O, welcome to the chat. We'll have you. Miranda's mid talking about just kind of what the day-to-day role is like at Insight. After she gives that little spiel, I'll have you give a little more of your context too, and then we'll continue on the day-to-day stuff. But Miranda, I don't want to cut you off mid-thought, so go ahead and do that.
Not a problem at all. So on a day-to-day basis, we were reaching out to CEOs from startups all across the world, having real conversations, trying to figure out what they wanted to do, where they were thinking about going, how Insight could maybe work with them either now or in the future, and that was kind of what our role was like day to day. Once a company looked like it was a potential investment, there'd be a lot more to the role. As an intern, I didn't see the full timeline through. I was only there for 10 weeks, but that's kind of on a day-to-day basis would look like.
Awesome. Let's let Steve-O give his intro, and then we'll continue on the day-to-day. So Steve-O, well, thanks for joining us. LA traffic, right? Tough.
Can you hear me?
But we're in terms of the background, I know I had sent a little blur, but just can you give some context on kind of what your firm, when you joined, background on you, where you went to school for Excel, and kind of how you got involved at your firm and stuff like that.
Sounds good. First of all, so sorry I'm late, guys. In Los Angeles, we have this thing called traffic that every now and then will kind of slow you down a little bit. But, hi guys, my name is Breitzer. I was in the initial Excel class of 2011, and I worked at Checkpoint back then. I went to Stanford for undergrad, did my master's at Stanford as well. I graduated in December. Sorry, I have a little bit of echo. Graduated and I joined Upfront this past year, so I've been there for almost 7 months. I'm an associate at Upfront, so that means that I will handle everything throughout our drug pipeline process. I'll do a little bit of sourcing,
we got to pause.
So what's up?
Okay, it keeps going back and forth. Miranda, can you mute your mic? If you I don't know, you do that like that. Okay, Steve-O, try talking again. It was like a crazy echo and like.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Understand. Yeah.
Sorry about that. Okay. Were you able to hear anything I just said, or should I just keep going?
I'd jump back a little bit if you don't mind, but keep it brief.
Okay. Brief, condensed version of everything I just said. Excel class of 2011, Checkpoint during that summer, Stanford undergrad, Stanford masters, graduated my masters in December. Was a ski bum for 3 months. Joined Upfront after that in April. So I've been there for about 7 months as an associate. As an associate at Upfront, I will touch every element of our deal pipeline process. That means a little bit of sourcing, a little bit of due diligence on deals we're considering. Once we are putting a deal through, I'll get to do all the lawyer work and finance fun. And after that, probably my favorite part is I get to support the portfolio companies that we've invested in and work with the CEOs on whatever strategic needs they need. Upfront is the largest VC firm in Southern California. We have most recently a $300 million fund that we've started investing since beginning of December. Around the early winter. And we do early stage investments from seed through Series B, so 500K check size through 10 million. And Avery, are you saying something? I just see like a little bubble. Okay, sorry. We will invest across all industries, from digital media to consumer retail to agricultural technology to automotive. So really anything interesting that pops up, we'll get excited about it. And Avery, is there anything else I need to hit? You're muted.
That is great. Yeah, so we're gonna be muting when we're off the mics because it'll be better in terms of the screen will flash around and stuff like that.
How many people do we have joining us on the other side?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I know we had a couple dozen who had signed up to join, which was exciting. I'm not sure how many made it, but we are recorded, so this will be something we can share with people. So that'll be exciting. Miranda gave a little bit of context more about kind of the role at Insight. I certainly want Brandon to speak about kind of what his day-to-day has been like as well, and then we'll all touch on that. So Brandon, you're up.
Yeah, sure thing. So I think one of the best things about the job in general is that the day-to-day can be so different. It's not like some jobs you show up day one, they teach you how to twist the widget, and then you come back the next day and twist the widget the same way. And in VC, there's no way to twist the widget, and there is no widget. So any given day, I could be working on writing a blog post. I could be doing outreach to companies. I could be doing diligence on deals. I could be doing more kind of market-driven research and trying to figure out areas of investment that are most important. But I think kind of generally speaking, whenever you're a junior person at a VC firm, the key thing is just providing value to the partners. and just kind of leveraging your skill set in the best way that you can in order to drive value for the firm. And so a really easy way of doing that is by going out and looking for deals, because just think of the economics of what they're paying you. Like spoiler, like they're not paying me $10 million a year, but if I find a deal that they put $10 million into and they double or triple their money, then I'm worth my salary. It's kind of one way you can think about it. But just anything else you can do too. Anything you can do positive for the firm's brand. Just going out, rubbing elbows at local events. That's something I try to do a lot of as well. But generally speaking, I would say mostly reaching out, talking to people. I'm sure that's pretty common probably amongst all of us. But also just trying to be creative and kind of think of new ways and new things I can do really every day to just drive value for the firm.
That's really awesome. Thank you so much, Brandon. That I really do. It's a bit nuanced, right? But it is. Brandon hit it, right there about like trying to make yourself valuable to the firm. I mean, that is something that is just. It's not always something that you really think about, but when you join these smaller places or smaller teams, moving the needle at a firm like this is finding deals. And so, a lot of us, like you said, if you can find investment opportunities for your firm, that is certainly pretty compelling. But as Brandon said, as he grows his network and as he builds his brand or does other types of stuff, that ultimately is good for the firm. And so those are things that are that's a little bit more of a nuanced way to think about it, but it is something I'm sure we'll touch on as we go through more of this type of stuff. So
if I may jump in here really quickly, if I may just cut in really quick, one interesting thing that Avery said that I'd actually like to expand on a little bit. He mentioned that moving the needle at these firms is bringing in deals. What I find so interesting about VC in general, and given how different each of our roles are at each of these very different firms, moving the needle could actually mean something entirely different at a different firm. For example, at least for myself, they actually don't really want me to be spending that much time sourcing deals. I, of course, love the schmooze and meeting with entrepreneurs and having those types of chats, but the partners have so much inbound that they don't really need me to be sourcing. And if I were to be spending too much of my time sourcing and not enough of my time doing either the diligence work or supporting portfolio companies or operations projects within the firm itself, then they would be pretty pissed off at me and I would not be doing my job. So for myself, at least, moving the needle is really just executing on all the other random shit that they want me to be doing from day to day. And sourcing deals is kind of like the fun thing that I allow myself to do on the side. If that makes sense.
No, I totally agree. That's it, Steven. I was going to set you up for that one, but that's right. So our firms, we're the Battery's pretty stage agnostic, meaning they'll invest earlier stage and later stage and all of that. And Brandon's role, as he mentioned, is to find deals. Miranda's role was certainly to reach out to entrepreneurs and find deals. My role as well, which I'll speak about a little bit right now, is that I was going to tee up Steven. So Steven's role is a bit more dynamic in that he is touching some on the outbound and stuff like that, and he'll speak more about what your day-to-day is like. It is at an earlier stage fund. A lot of it is meaning like you're taking the first pass at something. You're doing the research. You're digging into the diligence, and so it's a little bit less about you're building your own network at some of those firms. And he'll talk about that a little bit more. But for me, closing the loop about what I do at LeadEdge. So we are also a growth fund and similar model. Two of the partners at my firm came out of Bessemer. They were the first cold callers at Bessemer. One came out of Insight, so that's how I originally had that connection. And those are obviously awesome firms. They knew that if they ever wanted to create their own brand, they would need to have something different, and that's kind of what I spoke to you about us that we leverage to help. My role is basically a sales rep for LeadEdge. And so that is something that I think is pretty interesting. A lot of people, when they think about VC, they think about, oh, isn't it so sexy, and you're doing investments, and you're saying yay or nay to all this stuff. And really, how it works is the top of the funnel, like how do you find these opportunities, is really like folks like myself, young guns who are out there smiling and dialing, turning over different opportunities and illuminating, having initial conversations with entrepreneurs. And a lot of my time in terms of a day-to-day is having these calls, doing outreach, basically managing a pipeline of deals as opposed to prospects. It's sort of like deals, and so we leverage a technology called Salesforce, which is a big customer relations management software that we've customized for our workflow. But I have leads. I hit them up every week. It's really about staying persistent, chasing people down, getting them on the phone. And oftentimes, we'll talk about some sourcing best practices as well if that's of interest, but, where there's smoke, there's fire, so you see stuff that's kind of heating up, and maybe there's some interesting companies in the space. There's different kind of tactics about how you go and find companies, but happy to talk about that a little bit later. But in terms of a day-to-day, I think it is good to know that a lot of my job is outbound sourcing, cold outreach. Beyond that, I also think that something I wanted to with this question, what I like most about the role is it's extremely dynamic. So one day, and Brandon said you're jumping into a bunch of different spaces, but you're looking at a ton of different businesses, a ton of different business models. You're a young person who's networking with people who are building very interesting, impressive businesses. Is a pretty unique opportunity. That being said, it also, and we can speak a little bit more about the dynamics of starting your career on this side of the table, and Miranda would love, we'll also, let you open up about kind of how you're thinking about that stuff as well. It's starting at the VC side of the table, having not operated a business, I'm a bit less valuable to an entrepreneur as a partner for capital. And that actually is why my firm created the model where we have all these investors who've come in and invested with us. And that is part of how we add value to companies. But I think that it's important to think about, is this the best place to start your career? Is this something you stick around for a long time? And so we can talk a little bit more about that type of stuff. But figured that was some context, a little bit more about the day-to-day. Steve, I know you jumped in there, but I'll also let you finish. If there was more color about your day-to-day, that's a little bit different than what you touched on before. I'll happy to let you do that there. And once we get that, we can move on to the next couple questions.
Yeah, happy to chat. I think as Brandon said, I completely agree. My day-to-day is completely different every single day. I don't think I've had 2 days that were similar. Like tomorrow, I'll be at a partner meeting and doing a financial analysis of one of our companies as it's potentially leading towards exit. The following day, I'll be meeting with a couple entrepreneurs as well as going to a conference. The following day, I'll be working on an internal operations project. We're doing a big analysis of our deal pipeline. The following day, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but it'll be different from that as well. And I've been loving that. That's been keeping it incredibly exciting. There's so many different priorities at any one time. And I love the fact that you can't really get bored because every day there'll be 5 different and very different things to do. I am a big nerd who really loved school a lot, and that's why I stayed for an extra 1.5 years to do a master's. And what I love about this job is it still feels a little bit like school, where I have several very different classes at any one time and a lot of work for each of those classes, and I'm learning a lot from each of those too. So I love the deal work, I love the support, the actual work for companies, and I love the internal operations work too. And they're dramatically different from one another, and there's different projects within those buckets, and it's been great. But yeah, as far as like general day-to-day goes, it's hard to really say because I don't really have a general.
No, it evolves, and that's something I just in terms of giving people a little perspective, and just in terms of the difference between something like that's an earlier stage fund, the role for junior level folks across different stages of companies, it does matter. So earlier stage funds, typically partnership driven, a lot of their network brings opportunities to them. The people on the junior team are really support for portfolio work, market diligence, all sorts of stuff. I mean, Steve listed a bunch of cool stuff that he's working on, so it really does vary. In addition to sourcing and having networks and doing that stuff, at a growth fund like mine, the people we are chasing are companies that are already doing great. They're really growing well, and we're trying to say, hey, we'd love you to partner with us and let us come on board. We can find ways to help, and otherwise, and happy to give a fuller pitch to folks who want to hear about LeadEdge more particularly. But ultimately, growth stage is really about finding these diamonds in the rough. And I think that's a little bit of a different dynamic than the earlier stage stuff. So I'd say, the role skews a little bit much more towards sales at the growth stage versus kind of the earlier stage where it could be, portfolio support, community management, other kind of entry points for VC. There's a few, and I think let's transfer the conversation a little bit now as well to kind of the recruiting piece and kind of and things like that. I think if someone's let's go around one piece of advice you'd give someone, starting in the recruiting process for VC, is the question I had written specifically. And just to knock out a couple, Andrew Cufton is here. Thanks, Andrew, for your questions. He asked about how transparent and opaque the hiring process is, and I think maybe that's one we could also lump in, and then also kind of the VC recruiting if it's certainly tied to campuses or not. And so let's go around here, Brandon. Let's have you start it off with kind of one thing, best practices for getting into VC. What advice do you have for people starting out?
Sure. So I did a little bit of research kind of before I got on because I knew people would be kind of asking something in this direction. Something I saw on Quora that I thought was a really interesting piece of advice that I did not follow is, so I would, number one, if you're not doing it already, you should subscribe to Dan Premack's email. Get it every morning and look at it. And if you want to be doing VC, you should find that interesting to read, and you should read it every morning. And one of the things that he'll talk about is when a firm is raising a new fund. So if it's like a $200 million fund and their next fund's a $400 million fund, my guess and the great advice that I read was, they might be looking at hiring people. That's typically when a lot of transitions happen, and so that's a really good time to just start cold emailing and cold calling those guys if they're kind of in the process of a new fund. So kind of a very specific piece of advice, but I think that could be worthwhile in terms of looking into that. Was there another question along with that in terms of campuses and stuff like that?
Or maybe you want to speak to how you ended up navigating to Battery, or what you did there?
Yeah, so I went through the on-campus recruiting process at Penn. Originally, they were only going to bring on a PE analyst. They actually have never had a VC analyst before. So I went through the entire kind of, so basically Battery has a venture growth group and also a buyout group. And buyout has brought on analysts before and venture hasn't. So I went through that entire process with buyout, came up for the Super Day, met with 6 people on the buyout side, and then at the very end, one of the partners on the VC side just happened to be free. And I pushed back my flight, and we had a conversation and kind of just hit it off. So I was very lucky. I think that's probably something that would tie into, for all of us, is there's a lot of luck involved. I was lucky that I landed at Bessemer through Excel. I was lucky that we did the deal with Battery. I was lucky that the most busy person in the world that I know had a free hour randomly on a Monday. So a lot of luck fed into that. So certainly there is a lot of, there are some core campuses that probably a lot of the analysts come from. I mean, I guess 3 of us went to Penn. One of us went to Stanford. I think those are probably the 2 schools that drive a lot of it. But then, just looking at Battery, I mean, we have people from schools that you've never heard of before, the schools that I've never heard of before, just random places. And I mean, I think the way to kind of kick down the door is just being incredibly, incredibly, incredibly persistent and sending lots of emails and calling people and, kind of doing what Avery will do and what I will do for companies, which is, set a weekly reminder and, ping them again if they haven't responded to us yet. Figure out your target firms, the ones who look like they might be hiring, or maybe they've brought on analysts before, and maybe we can go around and give a more thorough list of firms we know that bring on analysts. And I would just figure out a partner. If you have a connection there somehow through LinkedIn or something, that's great. But if not, I would just literally email and then set a weekly reminder and then send another email and then just keep going, literally ad infinitum. And just keep pounding at it that way. I think that's kind of really the only way in.
That's awesome. Thanks, Brandon. I really would agree with that, and I think totally to close the loop on Andrew's question, there are some Insight very heavily recruits, and Miranda could speak about this at Penn, at Michigan, at some other Ivies and things like that. So those are kind of the obvious ones where they come to campus. But honestly, the only, and I think it's definitely, Brandon's suggestion about finding firms that are growing makes a ton of sense because those are people who need to expand their teams and do that type of stuff. I would just really hit home on that point about hustle and persistence. He said it's about lucky and definitely about lucky, but with luck comes preparation, and you got to be able to put yourself in those positions. And so just being persistent about getting in front of people. That's if my role is being a sales guy. The people who stay on my radar and keep wanting to be in front of me and do that, it's well, that's a good sign. He's doing that to get into this job, and so that's an indicator of how he will function, or she will function once joining the team. So I think that's certainly something I'd want to echo about just being persistent. Term sheet, absolutely is the one that you should be reading every morning. It shows you the deals, and you can see what's happening. I'd also want to throw out Venture Deals as another book written by Brad Feld. It's kind of a Bible of just learning about the industry. It's not so exciting, to be honest, a little dry, but if you want to get into VC, it's the bread and butter about that. And Andrew Stravitz is here as well. Adam. Adam, thank you for joining us. And he also had a question about what favorite tech blogs and websites do you use? Oh, this is for sourcing deals, which is good. But also throwing in term sheet. Guys, as you answer, you can mention. And for me, TechCrunch is certainly just kind of the baseline things or whatever. But there's various lists and Wired and Recode and other types of stuff. They come out with lists, and a lot of that's touched over, but sometimes do take a look. So with that, I'll pass it over to Miranda and let her talk about her recruiting process and any best practices for jumping in.
Sure. So Insight did recruit on campus. I knew I was interested. I'd never done VC officially before. I interned in cybersecurity when I was in Israel, and I had worked at Microsoft the summer before that, so pretty different. To prepare myself, the blogs they talk about, absolutely. I pretty much found any blog, any listserv I could get on. I listened to podcasts. When I walked, anything I could do to get myself fully invested and engaged with the material and what I would be doing and kind of what the role called for. And that allowed me to get a better understanding of where potentially I would look when I would source a deal. Brandon talks about being able to be a go-getter, and I think no matter what stage you're in VC, that's crucial. And so the idea that you'd be afraid to reach out to someone, or you're not sure if it's an official process or not, if that kind of is your mentality, this is not probably the industry for you. You need to be able to just go for it, to want to be out there, to want to reach out to these companies, to want to talk to people. The one thing that I think is kind of interesting about VC is, you work with a lot of startups, and so you think about it as being a really young and techy environment, and it is that, but a lot of times the CEOs of, especially probably, I guess, in later stage, growth stage companies, these CEOs are older, they're established, even though they might be running the most technologically advanced company, it doesn't have the same kind of Facebooky techy feel, and so there's quite a balance between being professional and kind of coming into it with a professional way of holding yourself and reaching out to other people, and also at the same time knowing that you like tech and it's cool, and that's that part too. So that's one of the things that I thought was an interesting way to kind of balance between these fields, and one of the ways I thought about when I looked into the application process. But for me, it was a pretty standard application through Penn, through the on-campus recruitment.
Very cool, thanks. And Steve-O, let's, also from your perspective, maybe, advice about, a little bit about your process maybe too, but then also advice about someone maybe looking to go earlier stage in terms of getting into an earlier stage fund, or if there's anything like that. But definitely would reiterate Miranda's point as well. It really not these, these are smaller firms. Something like Insight has a standard. We're going to hire this many people every summer. A lot of other firms is a lot more opportunistic. So definitely get on people's radar, even if it doesn't seem like they're hiring. Definitely continue to stay in touch. It really is just a lot of this thing. A lot of getting into this industry is about knowing when there's an opening, and so to do that, you just have to stay close to it. So that's just an echo of her point on that. And Steve-O, take it away.
Unfortunately, I don't have a helpful answer here because I did just get incredibly lucky. I graduated in December, didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I moved to Mammoth. And, Mikey, can you turn your microphone off because there's a bad echo issue? Yep. Okay, I think we're good. Thanks, man. Moved to Mammoth. Was spending 3 months just skiing and reading and growing a beard and taking a break from society and the world. And while I was out there, I got a call one day from a partner here at Upfront saying that I need to come down to Los Angeles for an interview. And I came down to LA, and a week later, I was an employed bearded man living in Mammoth. So I got incredibly lucky, and just because they were looking for a new associate to jump in as soon as possible, and a friend of a friend of a friend knew of a bearded master's graduate from Stanford living in Mammoth without a job. So I got incredibly lucky, and just from having a wide network of people who were aware of what I was looking to do. As far as like relevant backgrounds that helped prepare me for the role, as well as made me a relevant candidate, throughout my undergrad experience and during my master's, I was working with a large variety of tech companies, ranging from Checkpoint to a couple of different digital media startups. I also was consulting for Foundation Capital, a venture capital firm in the Bay Area. So I had some VC background, although admittedly not really preparing me for this experience by any means. And I am still figuring it all out. It's been 7 months, but I'm still continuing to learn and grow up from the other guys. It's hard really for me to discuss VC recruitment, not just because I didn't go through any normative recruitment process, but because my firm doesn't really have one. There's 3 associates, myself included. The other 2 guys, one guy's 29 and was at BCG, a couple startups before coming here. The other guy's 32 and was a journalist for Pando Daily for 11 years. So it's none of us really had any like well-structured process into this, and my firm certainly doesn't have a straight out of college young kid recruitment intent. They just made a huge mistake with me, and they're probably not going to repeat that again. And most firms I know in the Bay Area, at least most of my friends who are associates, tend to have had some experience at a consulting firm like McKinsey or BCG before jumping into VC. And I'd say the prevailing means by which they've gotten connected to this opportunity is the way that I think most things in life just happen to work, and that's through connections in your network and having somebody who can open the door, and then it's up to you to be able to walk through it. So unfortunately, at least from my perspective and from the 10 friends I have working in VC in the Bay Area, as well as myself, it's almost entirely just luck, circumstance, having somebody who knows you that's looking out for you, and yeah,
awesome.
Being ready.
Thanks, Steve. No, I appreciate that. I mean, I think that, as you can tell, his colleagues they all came from different paths. They all did different things, and I think so. That's something to consider about VC. Here's something out there out here. It's not so often that someone comes to VC and then is like a lifer at their firm. I gotta put that one out there. It's very common that people will come to a firm, they'll stick around a couple years, they'll move laterally. I haven't really fully gotten like on why that's the case necessarily. A lot of it is because when partnerships are formed at these firms, there's not like room for like other, it's like they create the mandate, they create the firm, they create the platform and the brand, and so there is certainly firms that have good succession processes and otherwise, but I think that's something that is a little bit different.
I will throw out there that at Insight it's a little bit different. A lot of the partners and people in leadership did start as interns, so there is a pretty a big opportunity to go up at Insight, and you'll even look at top level, and they started as interns and they stayed there their whole kind of career. That is where the career is. So there are some opportunities. I think it's dependent, but Insight, it's a bigger.
Insight's absolutely one. The guys who started as the first associates are now managing partners there, yeah, exactly. Which is awesome. Someone like Miranda who kills it over her summer, I'm sure could have come back and really built a career there. I know a lot of people who do. But to be honest, they had 20 analysts who joined, and then a lot of them went on to other opportunities. A lot of them are operating. My best friends there, 2 of them joined a company, 1 joined a startup firm. Like it is a little bit different by firm. And the only thing I meant by this point was that in the same way that Brandon was saying, and Miranda too, about just learning and digging into spaces and doing things. A lot of why people move laterally is because you learn a ton under one platform. Do that, and then moving to another company where you can share that knowledge and then learn from those partners and do that type of stuff. That seems to me very common, but I totally agree. Like Miranda, Insight is a firm you can grow at, which is awesome. And there are some firms like that, but that is just something I did want to say. That kind of every step of the way, there are people who join at different levels, do different things. It's not such a standard. You come into VC and you're a lifer in VC. Fred Wilson is someone who, he's a blog I totally would recommend, not necessarily for sourcing, but he is certainly a commentator of the industry. Both sides of the table. Mark Schuster's blog, the Steve-O's boss, I read every time all of his stuff, and I really do like it and learn a lot from him. So those are 2 of probably the most prolific VC bloggers I would recommend. But they'll tell you too. They write about how they got into the he was an entrepreneur. Steve Boss was an entrepreneur before he joined. Fred Wilson was just kind of got lucky and then had a great investing thesis and now is one of the preeminent investors. So that's a little bit more context.
What I would say about that too, if I can pop in. So I think this all kind of feeds into the question of, is it smart to go into VC out of college, and what would make somebody want to do that? And so I forget who it was, but there was some partner at Sequoia who was a very successful operator, and he was asked this very question about did his operating experience make him better off as a VC, and he had sterling operating experience, and he actually said no, and that he wished he had started doing this 10 years ago, because if he just spent 10 years in VC, he'd be a better venture capitalist today than he was when if having been an operator and just recently going. And so I thought that was interesting. I've never been an operator myself as well, so maybe I can't really say, but I thought that was an interesting perspective. In terms of a really great piece of advice I heard on why go straight to VC is you can kind of just think of it as like a 2 to 3 year MBA that you're getting paid to do. I think is like an interesting way to think about it. You're just going to be exposed to tons of different businesses and different business models and different problems. You really, really, really learn how to grow a business. You learn how to scale a sales team. Especially if you can get a board observer role, or at least go to board meetings and be involved with some of the portfolio work. You really just get really incredible exposure. And so sometimes there's opportunities to move up. The partner I work mostly under, a guy named Neeraj, he started as an associate, so it does happen. Rarely, but I would say generally there's no career path within VC. But there are cool opportunities. So one of my kind of mentors through this process, who actually is a former Insight guy, is a guy named David Fraga. And so he started at Insight out of college. He was there for a few years. Then he went on to become VP of growth at a company called Shutterstock, which is an awesome company. And he was there for 3 or 4 more years. And now he's the COO at Envision, which is one of my top 10 favorite companies right now. They're just absolutely killing it. And he's I think he's probably in his 30s now, low 30s, and he's C-level at an incredible startup. So I think that's just one example of not staying within venture path you take. But I think that opportunities are really open for you after doing this to go kind of do whatever you want and whatever you find interesting. So. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing that I guess I would say about VC is I think there are 2 types of people who get into it. There's financy people who think it sounds interesting to invest in technology companies or startups as opposed to working at Goldman or something like that. And there are kind of tech people who read about Fred Wilson or John Doerr or whoever and think that that's interesting. But I think if you're really, really strongly oriented in one of those 2 directions, you could find it to be frustrating. I think, if you're more of a financy person, you really have to love tech. If you're going to work at a tech-oriented startup fund, at least, you really have to love it, because that's your life, basically. That's what you're doing. You're, like Miranda says, you're listening to the podcasts, you're reading the TechCrunch before you go to bed. This should be stuff that you really love, or else you'll get really frustrated that you're just investing in the same kinds of things over and over. And if you're really tech-oriented person, I think the finance part can be tough, because you're not just looking for cool ideas. You're ultimately looking for companies that can provide equity value and exit at a good price and things of that sort. And you're asking kind of different sorts of questions than a pure product person would ask. So you really have to be bent in kind of both of those directions. But if you think that you are, if you love technology and you think the finance behind them is interesting, I think it can be a really awesome place to start out, and I think you find people who do quite well coming out of it.
Really awesome. Thank you, Brandon. That's a great perspective there. And I think I've heard a ton of people advise differently. I know, and maybe Stephen would have perspective there, being at an earlier stage fund, but I know some people, like my boss at BRM, after I was done with that summer, he said, the best way to go be a VC is to go and operate. And a lot of people will say that because you're empathetic to an entrepreneur, you understand their struggles. Maybe you can add value to what's what they're doing. I think beyond that, it's a little bit tricky. And I totally agree with Brendan. Like, that's not the only way to become a VC. I mean, I do think that when I think about being a good investor, a lot of folks also say, 10,000 hour rule. Like, if you want to be a good investor, keep doing investing, keep looking at companies, keep finding opportunities and all of that. So I think that is something I would just throw into the mix there. Additionally, there's and we'll let Steve come in a second. There's Q&A button on there, and we have some questions we've already touched on. But if anyone else has other questions, please do put them in there. We also had some viewers who mentioned that maybe the camera is not rotating based on who's speaking. If that's the case for you, please do comment in the questions, and we'll try to get that resolved. But Steve, did you have something where you wanted to pop in?
Yeah. No, I think it's really interesting. I think every firm definitely has a different perspective on this. I mean, as Avery mentioned earlier, Mark Suster is a big blogger, and his blog is titled Both Sides of the Table because it's really important for him and to his own experience and his own perspective as a VC that he was an entrepreneur as well. And I'm pretty sure all of our partners have had some major operating experience. I was told when I was interviewing and when I got the job that I would not be allowed to be at the firm for more than 3 years, that if I'm still hanging around after 3 years, they'll fire me and push me out and force me to do something different. And I've had every intention since I joined to be here between 1 and 3 years and jump into, ideally, an operating role for a startup. I think it's, especially once you start going to board meetings and you really get to see how closely the partner works with the companies themselves, it's hard to imagine, at least for me, it's hard to imagine the entrepreneurs truly respecting a lot of the advice that some of these partners have without the partner being able to really show that he's walked the walk as well and not just talking the talk. However, there are some incredible VCs who have been career VCs. So there isn't one rule, but definitely, at least with my firm, we definitely prioritize and hold in very high expectations a partner that somebody is walking the walk before they come back to talk the talk on the VC side of the table, if that makes sense.
Totally, that's great. Miranda, do you have something else you wanted to throw in there, or should we move on? I got another question here. If not.
Oh, I've covered, I think.
Okay, cool. Well, look, let's beyond that, I guess let's so we've kind of touched on some best practices for recruiting. I think Brandon, maybe that is a good idea. You had mentioned kind of throwing out some firms that you do know that hire. We do have someone. Okay, Mitchell, thank you for your question. And we'll do on this, and then we'll also mention some firms, Brandon, as well. Maybe firms we know that hire, or otherwise how to stay in the loop about hiring. And I could recommend some newsletters and stuff like that, so I'll mention those after we go around once. But Mitchell's question is, what advice would you give someone at a school that VCs do not recruit at to get their foot in the door for an internship? So, obviously already some of the stuff we just talked about was about getting on people's radars. So if the job is to be a cold caller or a cold emailer at a growth fund like a few of ours, just the persistence of getting in front of partners and getting in front of them is what I would recommend. But I'd also, and also you don't necessarily know if people are hiring or other things. Brandon mentioned, best practice is a firm that raises a new fund is probably looking to expand, so that's good. But Brandon, why don't we pass it over to you? And guys, let's throw out the names of some firms, in addition to ours that maybe that hire junior level folks, and any advice on that.
Sure. So I guess one thing that I'll say, and maybe rest in peace my inbox, but Battery's hiring for an analyst. We're actually doing our Super Day tomorrow. So if you're interested, we'll probably have another one in a few weeks. So if you're a current senior, 2016 graduate, and you're interested, shoot me a resume, and I guess that's my one plug. But other firms that are great that also recruit, I would say, so Bessemer, Insight, both recruit a ton. Summit recruits. I think TA recruits. I have buddy at General Catalyst, who's an analyst there. I had no idea that they brought on analysts, but apparently they do, because he's there and he's a recent college grad, so maybe hit those guys up. But I'm already struggling to think of other ones. So I don't know, maybe that shows maybe I'm a little bit out of my depth, but I think, so the other thing you could do is, if you're interested, what another way in could be going to like an accelerator or something like that. So Techstars takes on a ton of people. Mass Challenge in Boston takes on a ton of recent college grads. That's honestly all I've got. I can't really think of too many other places.
That's wonderful advice, and I'd also throw that out there as well. People who think, about how do you take a first step that is valuable towards coming in here. I think a lot of consultants do make the jump, and I know we just hired someone post MBA, but also post being consulting for many years, and he's coming in hot, doing all the diligence, all the market research, all the stuff that he did on that job. So consulting certainly is finance, just banking. People do that and transfer in, so that makes sense, and it's also related to that. But the other thing I would say, getting to accelerators, local community co-working spaces, all of these types of things where businesses are being built and entrepreneurs are working, that type of lens, like being in companies and find deals and meet entrepreneurs, it's very similar to what you would do at a fund. Working on building that network is important. So some of those accelerators might be a little bit easier. They might take on someone who just I often advise that to people just looking to get into tech, because it's a great lens. You look at a ton of different businesses, different business models. That's very cool. There's other companies like CB Insights is one here in New York that's been do research and markets space, marketplace landscaping. So like on that front, you're like going to be in the weeds building taxonomies of different players in the space. That's super valuable. But when you show up and they're like, oh, so what's an interesting company? You actually say, hey, I think this company's super interesting. I know they play in this space, etc. So that's just some general advice on that. But the one thing I also want to throw out there, because it was relevant of what people do, is someone, Dan, submitted a question offline, but he said, how often have you seen people with engineering experience transition into the venture industry? Not just the folks who are startup founders who become angel investors. What kind of jobs do they do for the firm? And who at a VC firm works on betting technology for companies that the firm is investing in? So awesome questions, all relevant to there. I'll pass this over to Steve-O in a second as someone who actually has some engineering background. But for me, I just would also want to mention that a lot of folks, look, the sales cold calling role, like it's not necessarily for everyone. It is for certain folks. In terms of people, with engineering, I know a ton of folks who came out of product or came out of other places, engineers out of Microsoft, who joined earlier stage funds. That background is pretty valuable in terms of looking at code or looking, understanding the challenge of building a product. I think it's super valuable. Miranda as well, obviously from the engineering world, so she can touch on that as well. The other thing is that at firms, there's also people use a lot more technology now to source, which is also pretty interesting. So I know we've taken on interns and other folks who focus on our tech stack or on other things about how do we leverage web traffic data or employee growth data or things like that to build tools for sourcing. So that is something that as well, internally that engineers get involved. Works on betting tech. A lot of times it's the engineers, the engineering background partner type of thing to do the betting. But oftentimes people are calling in consultants. For my firm, we have a network of investors, 300 LPs that I've mentioned. We introduce our deals to them and say, hey, can you look at this technology? What do you think about it? So we get them a little more hands-on. But really, I'd say kind of across the board, internal consultants, otherwise. You so got it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say generally kind of related to that is I don't think that there's anybody coming out of college who would be able to do like tech diligence on Cloudera. Like that would just be bizarre. Like I don't like, no matter how like well built your skill set is, like you are generally not going to be the person or the right person to do a lot of that work. So I think it's it's useful. It is useful to an extent. I don't want to like belittle the potential usefulness of it, but I will say like that will probably not be a dominant part of your job. And I know people who have been disappointed by like the lack of doing tech, like the literal doing of technology while you're in VC, which is the only reason why I caution that. You're going to be looking a lot more kind of from the business perspective, and then you'll probably bring in people or consult out to people who like will go through the nuts and bolts and like make sure like the source checks out, the source code checks out.
Just great. All right, let's hear from the engineers. Miranda, you first.
So I think Brandon makes a really good point that for a lot of parts, you don't need an engineering background. For me, I felt like when I was sourcing, it was really helpful to have, because when I would have these conversations with CEOs, a lot of them are engineers. So that's when it really came into play that I could talk pretty deeply about the technology. I spoke to them about their backgrounds, and in terms of kind of building that initial connection with the CEO, I thought it was pretty helpful. One of the things I know at Insight is, for the due diligence, for anything else, they have actually an on-site consulting team, and that group really works on, for the portfolio companies themselves, and also for the diligence if they need help with for the investment team. And it was something I was kind of intrigued with when I was on the investment team as an intern. So, as an engineer, your biggest thing is problem solving. That's what you do, and that's not, I don't think that's like the key thing with VC, especially when you look at an initial investment. It's not just solving a problem right there. The company is, and you have to identify what companies are solving the right problems, and how to use that efficiently, and how you can be an asset for them as a VC. But that was something that I felt like I wasn't actually doing as much, and it is actually one of the reasons that I'm probably not interested in going to VC right now. Is I'm not going to be a full-on engineer, but I really want to feel a little bit more like an engineer at this point in time.
Awesome. You got anything to add about the roles of engineers at funds?
So I'm not a real engineer per se. In undergrad, I studied product design, and my master's was management science engineering, so like an industrial engineering major where I focused on competitive strategy. So while I don't have a deep background on like the true technical components of most product creation, I do have enough of a sense of product, of design, and of positioning a product within a market, and that does come into play. But given that we are very early stage, between seed and Series A is where most of our deals land, at the end of the day, it's a lot of gambling, and you're really betting on teams more than anything, because we'll make bets on companies and their product will change as they're using our money to continue to grow and build their products. They might even be pre-product entirely. So at the end of the day, we're really doing a due diligence process, focusing on the team itself, as well as what their customers think about. And that actually has been great for me because I have significantly higher EQ than IQ. And as far as doing a diligence process and really honing in on who the people are, talking to references that are both character references as well as customer references, and getting a strong sense of who you're giving this money to, is as important as anything else for us. If it's definitely like a seriously technical product that is far outside of the insight of anybody on the team, then we will have reference calls to experts within that category and round our understanding from that side. And so there hasn't been a moment where I regretted not having that understanding myself, because we've always been able to find out what we need to find out. But you definitely want to be able to hold your own in a conversation with the CEO when you're meeting with them. And if you can't at least follow along and try to build understanding around the technology, then it's going to definitely be tougher to impress them as well. So at least being able to talk in that capacity has been helpful, but because we're early on, it hasn't been a necessity.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve-O. I think the other piece I'd also mention, because I don't think we've really touched on it, is that part of what's challenging about this role, part of what's exciting about this role, is you really have to be able to speak on a lot of different things kind of on your feet. And so part of that is, Miranda can actually talk the talk and then hear about the engineering and the languages and all this stuff with the CEO. But oftentimes you'll maybe be looking at a space you don't know so well, or you're jumping into cybersecurity or other stuff, and you read a ton. I mean, you try to learn, but also even on a call, they're like, why are you interested in my space? And you gotta answer. So you gotta have some perspective, have some stuff, and that comes with time, that comes with experience. But I think that thinking on your feet is definitely kind of important, and that's part of what the recruiting process is. There are a lot of hurdles and things in general, just because they want people who can be creative and think creatively. And unless you're Steve-O and with an awesome firm, the rest of us went through some processes. So The other thing I also wanted to mention, just one last thing about the Q&A. I think we'll kind of wrap up in just a couple minutes here. But if also Ethan, thank you for watching. He submitted and thought it would be awesome for us to circulate kind of list of blogs and the people to follow that we mentioned. So guys, we should all sync up about some of the shared resources, and we can put together a little best practices thing. But I'll just throw out some names of some other stuff in terms of knowing about who's hiring, what companies are hiring, and things like that. I wanted to mention stuff like Uncubed is the name of it. There's ones in big hiring fair, but you can see the companies that are a part of it, and there's a lot of listings. In New York City, there's a newsletter called Gary's Guide. Has a lot of job listings and other types of stuff. So we'll put these all together, but just want to throw out some random stuff. And guys, if you have other stuff you want to throw in the mix, that's great. In terms of one other question we didn't get to touch on yet was Andrew Cufton had asked about graduate level. Are MBAs the primary focus, or would an MA and econ fit? Honestly, I think coming in with a master's to VC is certainly a fit in any capacity. I think honestly, the entry point is what's sort of tricky, because sometimes you can come in as the junior level folk. You're kind of like a sales rep. You can come in, Steve goes a little bit on, hey, come and learn with us and grow with us, and then kind of transition to something else. He's on a little more platform. A lot of firms have 2-year associate positions, pre-MBA. They say come and work for 2 years, and then people go to school. They go to product manage. They start a company. There really is not it's not a one-size-fits-all opportunity. So there is in terms of the ways to enter. I think awareness about is certainly important. Hustle and persistence to get in front of people. But it really at every stage of the way, there are folks circling who want to get involved. So the biggest thing I could advise is just get close to firms that are doing it. In fact, my firm's hiring, so I guess I didn't do that plug either. Lead Edge Capital, we're looking for full-time associates to start now. We're looking for maybe also a college senior to come in the summer. So I've spoken to some of you about it, but happy to share more. In terms of also just throwing out some other names of firms, Elliott's at the Stripes Group, which is built out a bigger analyst program, so that's a firm to also consider. A bunch of great firms in New York. Box Group just expanded a little bit. They're an earlier stage fund. Union Square Ventures has this thing, the Union Square MBA. It's an amazing firm. They take people with a diverse background, operating experience otherwise, but that's one that they hire kind of infrequently and more opportunistically. OpenView and also in Boston has some junior level folks they hire. So Battery, obviously, where Brandon is out there as well. Those are just some ones off the top of my head. Guys, let's just go around. If you have any other kind of last minute kind of resources or things to mention, definitely would love to throw it out there.
Cool.
I think people have to look too. Like we can come up with a list, but that's part of the job is like knowing where to look and trying to find it. And if you find one alley and you think that's an interesting kind of tangent, I'll go from there to a different source. Whether that's a blog or that's a company or it's a VC itself. So I'm sure we can put together a list and people will have suggestions. But if you're kind of excited to go out and look and excited to find things and see what's available, that's, I think, a big part of VC, at least it was an Insight, and that kind of excitement. So, I know even when I prepared for my interview, I read everything. I was on every listserv, every blog, and I found it. I found random ones. I don't even know who was writing them, just because I wanted to be fully engaged with it all. And being excited about preparing for the interview made me feel really comfortable that I would really like being in the job, and that part I really did. I'm going somewhere else, probably, switching industries entirely, but it was a great learning opportunity, and that kind of excitement is, still what I have. The learning and the kind of academic side of it is really great.
Awesome, thanks, Brandon. Any last words?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, just being persistent is going to be the number one thing. I think, just trying to knock down as many doors as you can. Like, you want these people to be, when their head hits the pillow at night, to be, thinking your name. It's like that level. Like, just really, go hard, and I think that's the best way in. Very much agree with everything that Miranda says. I think, at Battery, we circulate some best practices sourcing-wise, but a lot of it is kind of left up, to us, because we don't want all to be pulling from the same list. We want to have different processes and, be looking in different places. So, I think Miranda said podcasts. That's like one thing I do. I listen to a bunch of different podcasts. I'd like to actually source a bunch of companies from those. Like, that's like a random thing. But like, figuring out like a random kind of place for you to go and find stuff, I think is good. And then I guess like the last thing that I'll say is like keep giving back to the Excel network. I think this is a really incredible thing that we all did, and I certainly owe a lot. I think I owe a lot in terms of where I am now because of this. And you guys see me posting way too much in terms of jobs and things like that. I'm trying to be really active, but give first. Give a lot, and really just leverage this incredible network that you have, because I think if you're still in college, especially, like, my guess would be this is like one of the top things that you got, and so really just dive in on this and put effort into this, and I think that I think the network can give you a lot and also give a lot to it. So I guess that's my last thought.
Awesome, thank you so much. One thing before Stephen goes, I just want to clarify. We certainly can share like best practices for sourcing and stuff like that, but honestly, like more about resources about getting into the industry, who to read, like what VC blogs are interesting, how to find jobs in the industry, that type of stuff. I think we should share in terms of like which list or podcast to subscribe to. That could be extra, but I think it's sort of just those resources about who to follow on Twitter and those ones. Like we can just there's a bunch of different lists and we have ideas there, so we can just pool our thoughts there. And then once you become a VC yourself, we can share sourcing best practices beyond that too. Steve-O, you got any last words?
Sorry, I missed the initial question. The question's about sourcing deals?
No, it's not. This is just kind of wrapping up about, kind of best practices getting in, and any last thoughts?
I mean, I got incredibly lucky, so I guess my recommendation is to be very lucky. There's not much more I could say on that front.
All right, Steve-O.
But I'd also say that, like, this is the type of thing that the more relevant you are to a firm like this, meaning like the more jobs and things that you do within the ecosystem itself, the more likely you will be in the right place at the right time to get an opportunity like this. So there are so many different roles you could have within the general tech ecosystem, everything from being part of a startup, being in VC, working with startups, whether you're a marketing firm or a law firm or whatever it is, that whenever it comes up that a VC needs a specific skill set, you'll be ready for that. So it's hard to really say because, again, like the associates at this firm alone have such different paths, but do whatever it is that you want to be doing, and I think you'll only be more valuable once you are in VC if you've been jumping into interesting roles before you're able to get into VC, if that's the path that you're pursuing.
Makes a ton of sense. Thanks so much, Steve-O. I'll just close with guys. If you have any other things you want to jump in as well before we close, you can do that. But just want to say thank you, Mikey, again for getting this together. I think it was pretty awesome to bring folks together. We certainly can do more in the future, and I think it'd be interesting to talk about deals or talk about companies or new technologies we're seeing, because that could be interesting to folks. But for me as well, just want to say if anyone would like to speak further about what it's like or want to talk about my firm or about best practices, I'm happy to be a resource too. So you can reach out to me. My Gmail is avery.rosen@gmail.com. It's ROSIN. That's how you spell my last name. And we have the directory here, and we'll send around a little kind of follow up to the folks that attended or people with questions. But I think let's we'll settle it. And thank you guys for tuning in on a Sunday. Really appreciate your time, and let's look forward to the next one. Cool.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Cheers.